Okay, welcome. So yeah, as introduced, my name is Willem Wigman. I founded Hyvä Teams, which is a team-based front-end for Magento. So it's based on PHP, layout XML, all the fun stuff that we love, but it doesn't use all of the technologies that we didn't love about the old front-end. Today, I'm not going to talk about the team that we have, but I'm going to talk about a new product that we're launching this month probably, which is a checkout. Hyvä might be a strange name to you. You might hear it a lot as Hyvä or Hyvä. Originally, it comes from Finnish, and it has a lot of meanings that resonate with me personally in trying to build the best possible product and be trustworthy and build something that's desirable to work with. So that's woven throughout our whole company in the way that we work and in the products that we build and the way that we treat each other and our product, etc. Our team is doing pretty well. We launched almost exactly 2 years ago, I think 2 years and 2 days to be exact. And we're on course to become the second most used front-end after Luma in just the course of 2 years. So that's very exciting growth to see. We're more than a team. Initially, the idea was also to build more than a team and build an ecosystem around it. And we understood that just building the team is only one facet of creating a successful ecosystem and community around it. So we build a lot of tooling to make the work for developers enjoyable. And I think we're quite successful at that because we hear so many positive responses, especially at conferences like this. People I have never met before, except for online, come to me and just share their stories about how much more pleasant their work became and that they decided to still work with Magento, whereas they before were seeking to exit the community. Outside of that, we're building additional products. The checkout is one of them. Another one is a UI library that will allow you to just drag and drop components into your team that are fully functional and designed, and make it very easy for you to build a custom team based on the requirements of your customers. So different menus, footers, galleries, etc. So developer happiness is really at the core of what we initially built. And me as a developer myself felt the pain of working with Luma. I was entirely done with it, especially optimizing it for performance. So by accident, I started to build a web shop from scratch that immediately was super performant because I started from scratch, and the focus stayed on performance and developer happiness. A lot of tools from the Laravel ecosystem that people are very enthusiastic about. I decided to try and use that in combination with Magento, and immediately took off. For me personally, I got so excited working about it, and that feeling only spread with everyone that was working with it. So we've proven to make, for a lot of developers, their life a lot more pleasant, their work life. How do we want to do the same for checkout, which is probably the most troublesome area of Magento? To make customizations, just add a checkbox for newsletter subscription, and you'll lose a week of time fighting UI components and layout XML. We set out to build something better that also is enjoyable for a developer to use. We have our open source React checkout that uses GraphQL for all the communication. It works well. It's extendable if you know how to work with React, but it's very time consuming to build a custom checkout with it. And it turned out that doesn't really fit with our typical developer that works with Hyvä, because they just came for not working with JavaScript. We made that so much easier, and now they still needed to work with modern JavaScript in the form of React. There was a bit of a disconnect there, and it was always the idea that we would also build a checkout that was PHP driven. And along came MageWire. Willem Wigman, another Dutchman with the same first name, he approached me and he said, "I love everything you do with Hyvä," and I got motivated to also build something that would make people's life easier. And I saw Livewire for Laravel, and I started to build it for Magento. And the cool thing about Livewire or MageWire is that it almost entirely takes away JavaScript from the front end. So you write a lot of PHP code on the back end, and it's linked, and there's a lot of AJAX calls when required, and only updates if it's necessary, if data change. So it's efficient, it's fast, and it had a lot of potential. So Livewire for Laravel is kind of an alternative to single-page applications, to say it simply. So the creator also created Alpine.js, which is the only JavaScript library that we use on the Hyvä frontend. So that also works seamlessly together with what we already have in the Hyvä frontend. So MageWire is what our colleague Willem built, the other Willem. Yeah, he's maintaining that as a side project and keeping it in sync with Livewire. And the basic of a component in Livewire, this comes from that documentation, is quite simple. You need 3 elements or three components. One is a PHP component class. One is kind of a template file that renders the component, and then you have your front-end theme part where it's linked into Livewire, or where it's hydrated and made active. So this is how it looks in Laravel. If you look at how Willem Wigman translated that into how MageWire does it, you have a PHP class, which is a typical Magento PHP class. You have a HTML file that renders HTML, which is bound to MageWire for the wire column, and then you activate MageWire in that HTML file by layout XML. So just passing a view model that's MageWire that has the name MageWire automatically makes the HTML file a MageWire component, and then you can start building stuff in PHP, make variables available to the front end, and do simple actions. So here's some very basic interactivity. It's a counter. In a HTML file below, you can see there's an add1 function, and that's nowhere defined on the front end. It's defined on the back end in PHP. So you see the public function add1, and that just adds, it does plus on the counter, so it increments the counter to 1, 2, 3, etc. So this is interactivity without writing any JavaScript, which is a very cool concept. If you're a PHP developer working mostly on Magento, this is extremely powerful. So all the power to PHP when using MageWire. It shifts a lot of logic from the front end to the back end. And one of the things that I found most difficult about front end frameworks is that you constantly need to mimic the logic from the back end into the front end. So whatever happens in the front end needs to represent the back end state. So you need state management on the front end and sync that somehow with the back end, which is a huge overhead. And for me, it immediately became very complicated to build front end apps that are async with the Magento backend. There's just too much going on. You need to build in all of these exceptions. What if a quote expires, etc. So this is perfect. The state lives in the backend where it's already there. So why mimic it and copy all of that logic into the front end? So Willem wanted to work with us, and we said, we want you to work with us. So let's see what we can have you build. What's the most complex thing to get started with? And let's do that first. So 1.5 years later, we have a checkout, and it works quite magically. We're very, very excited about the opportunities it brings in customizability and extensibility and performance. So right here you see a 2-column checkout. with the second step. And here's a one-step checkout. And what I'll explain next is how easy it is to variate between these kind of layouts, how you define a different layout and just throw a component into a column in a certain step. It's super powerful and all run from the backend. So on performance, a MHWire component is a regular Magento class. Because of that, it's super extensible, like any Magento code in the backend. And the initial render happens server-side, and on the front end, there's no interactivity until you interact with it. So there's no extra Ajax calls to the backend until you actually use it. So that's just like an immediate render. So we all know the Luma checkout. For the desktop checkout, it takes 2.17 seconds to load, 3.2 megabytes, and 348 requests. So that's all technical. That's all JavaScript files in the front end that you need to work with if you want to customize anything. If you look at the MHWire checkout, you can see on the right, if it's readable, there's just one extra request compared to standard Hyvä. It's the Livewire JavaScript file. So you have 7 requests, and it finishes in less than 500 milliseconds. So it's an immediate render, half a second. And that's fully interactive. The difference is even bigger on mobile. If you switch to fast 3G connection, it takes 2.36 seconds with MHWire, and in Luma it takes 31 seconds to download all of the JavaScript files and unpack it and make it interactive on a 3G connection. I don't know about you, but being on a cell phone, loading a checkout for 30 seconds kind of makes me want to do other things. So you'll find me on Twitter or LinkedIn and forgot about the cart that I still have open. So that's 13 times quicker on Hyvä than it is on Luma. And if you take a state-of-the-art PWA as example, it takes 10.5 seconds to render on a mobile device. And this is the Adobe PWA that I'm referring to. We built in a lot of flexibility into how to customize this checkout. I think I need to speed up a little bit to get all of the content into 20 minutes. So, you load in a view model through layout XML, and then you basically have a MHWire component in PHTML. And then any public value in your PHP class becomes available in the front end. This is, for example, the component for coupon codes. On the right, you can see the class. It extends from component. And I have a public coupon code number that's being set on boot, which is a lifecycle method. There's a lot of magic methods that you can call in a MHWire PHP component, and one of them is boot. It means this is being loaded before the front end is being rendered. So we look if there's a coupon code active on the quote currently. And in the front end, you can see on the left in coupon code.phTML, you can see that we pull the coupon code from MHWire, which is a globally available variable in a PHP MHWire file or component. And I just pull out the public value for coupon codes from MHWire. And then you can see I wire model the coupon code value. And there's a bit of combination between Alpine.js in the front end to make things interactive and MHWire doing the rendering with the back end. So in the next one, you can see I highlight apply coupon code, which is a public method from PHP, which I can call from my PHTML file. If you look at the button and then the wire click method all the way at the bottom, you can see if you click it, the save action is being called, and the save action is apply coupon code. So that calls from the front end just by referencing the public function. I can call a PHP method in the backend. So if you look to the left, there's only syntax, there's no JavaScript. And on the right, you can see that the logic is being executed by PHP. Super powerful for a Magento PHP developer. So the most complicated thing is doing checkouts in Magento, and the front end is just so complex. And the average front-end developer working with Magento has a lot of issues with handling state and that level of complexity. Not all of them, but there is a very large chunk just want to make things look nice and work on interfacing and interactivity. And if you look at the left, that's something that any front-end developer can work with. It's HTML, and you can use Tailwind or other CSS, and they don't need to worry about writing the JavaScript code. So to add this coupon code component to the checkout or add it anywhere in the Magento frontend, you would do that through layout XML. You can see the argument MageWire is passing the coupon code class from the previous slide. And you can see here also in the layout XML, you have an if config, that's default Magento layout. And that's a store configuration value for discount code is enabled. So if you disable it, it's not being rendered in the front end. So again, all the power to the back end. What I'm most excited about is the way that we built the layout system and the stepping system, because we envisioned a checkout where if the merchant says, let's do billing first and shipping second, you wouldn't need to rewrite the whole checkout to be able to do that because of all of the constraints in the front end. I wanted a checkout where you would just change the order in layout XML and it would work. And that's what we built. So it took a while, but we're there. We have a general layout and step configuration. It's a Hyvä checkout XML file in your etc. etc directory. And any step that you define can have conditions, which are PHP rules. So you can write anything you want there. And you define new layouts in layout XML. I'm going to show an example. And you can inherit from another checkout to create a new layout that you can then configure from the admin interface. So if you're saying we have a mobile checkout and we don't want to show the coupon there, we create an alternative layout and just shift the layout a bit and remove some components, maybe add an alternative. So it's really powerful. This is an example of the Hyvä checkout XML file. You can see the global node checkout. It has a name and there's a layout defined. So this one is for 2 columns. And you see 3 child nodes called step. And they have a name, a label, and a route. So perhaps self-explanatory, but you give it a name to reference to from other layout XML files. The label is shown in the front end in the stepper mechanism, and if you go to the next step, it shows go to shipping, for example, if the next label is shipping. And it's conditional, so you can see in the first node, the first child node, you see that is guessed is a condition. If that's false, this whole step is not being shown. So if you have a B2B store and you want to show an extra step for terms and conditions based on the customer group, you create a PHP rule that checks the current active class, validates against group number 3, and if it's group number 3, you show an extra step for layout and conditions that only apply to B2B. Super powerful. These are the standard conditions that are implemented currently, and you can see is guessed is the third one. And that translates to a PHP file is guessed, where you can see a validate function that needs to be implemented there, and it just checks if the customer is guessed and returns it as a Boolean. That's all you need to show or not show a whole step. And here's an alternative layout. It's called mobile experimental. The parent layout is default, so it references to the one above. So it takes over all of that configuration. And then you can add changes like renaming the payment step here to payments. And the last step is renamed to summary. No, that's a new step that we're adding. So on mobile, we want to show a third step, which is called summary, instead of just doing the billing and summary on one step. So it's extendable, and you can just override, like you do with layout XML, you can just add, you can override it with your own Hyvä checkout XML file in your own module. So having defined our layout, so we have our default layout, it had 3 steps, we could just see, now we're creating building blocks that you want to put into those steps. So Hyvä checkout XML helps defining reusable blocks which you can just then link in each step. This is 20 minutes? Cool, okay. No Q&A, guys and gals. In each step you can set rules, make it conditional, and you can have layout directive files or layout files based on the step name and the checkout name. So you can make it like you do with router-based XML files. So if you have a CMS index that refers to the index CMS page. The same can be done here. So you can reference the default checkout or the mobile checkout. That's the next step. Here you can see all the components that we defined by default. So this is more or less one big container of components that we deliver out of the box that you can use in your checkout. So you see different containers here, and I'm going to show a little bit of the content of the additional options. So that's in the next one. You can see there's a block checkout quote summary. You can set the title of that section. So that's some standard HTML files as container that we have there. And you can see the coupon code that I showed earlier is here inserted as a block with the argument MageWire. So this is the whole interactive component for coupons. So that is now inside of a container called checkout quote summary section. Now, if you go into our 2-column layout for checkout, I'm moving from that previous file. So, wait, back. So here I defined my container checkout quote summary section, and here I'm calling that one out of that container that's never rendered and pulling it here into my layout. And you can choose to, you can just define your components here. So if you have your own component, you could insert it here into a reference block. But what I'm doing here is from that whole registry of components that I have available, I pull one into this one, and that's all I need to make it show there. Here you can see at the layout handle in the file name that this is for the mobile layout, and specifically the summary step. So with my layout XML file names, I can direct exactly where I want things to be shown. And this is a handle that's for a default a virtual cart. So if you have products without weight, software, for example, this is a layout file where you can remove blocks that you don't need then. So the shipping summary in the shipping section I'm removing here. Yeah, okay, so that was more or less the technical part. We're very close to releasing our early beta or early access. I must say we've had a long beta period with partner agencies that tested it. There's a couple of stores running in production now using it. Super enthusiastic, like payment providers we see that are making extensions compatible now. So that's one thing that we of course need as ecosystem of shipping and payment methods to support it. But the first payment integrator, MultiSafePay from the Netherlands, was at a hackathon that we hosted, and it took them 3 hours to understand how all of this works and make their first payment method compatible. 3 hours. So before the hackathon ended, they were halfway through making their extension compatible, and 2 weeks later they sent us a message, we're fully compatible. So yeah, that was super, it was a big affirmation for us that we did the right thing, and we spent almost 2 years on building this, but we didn't nail the critical parts where the developer experience and the time to learn something and to build something custom with it is greatly reduced. So we're super enthusiastic about this. And this is going to be an additional product on the team. Existing customers get a discount. It will be compatible with Luma in time as well. So right now it's Hyvä only, but we'll build a version that also works with Luma. So you can start working, you can just get rid of all of that Luma checkouts on any existing project. It will come with support packages. Either you buy it 5 years at once, or you take a yearly subscription. That's optional. You can cancel it anytime. Now it's hard to see because of the contrast, but we brought shirts. And if you like one, hit me up. I brought some downstairs, but there's more I can get from upstairs.
And since Hyvä is the hottest topic, we cannot let you go like this. Let's hit him with at least one question. Running.
No, that wasn't the question, but good question. No, how about support for additional payment methods like Adobe Commerce payment services, like, you know, the new PayPal add-ons, like when users are using like certain, you know, payment methods, that could be the biggest pain point to getting them into checkout. What's the developer lift for making that happen if that's potentially a barrier to a merchant adopting it?
Okay, so one of the best things that happened to Hyvä in the past year is that we got salespeople, partnership people, and we got checkout people in the form of Anton and Jean Lun, who came from One Step Checkout. They have loads of experience on this front. So they have these connections with payment providers. We have a lot of contacts already with payment providers that we want to invite to work on this with us. The ones that are critical, that won't pick this up themselves, we will provide. So looking at a Braintree, I know they don't do their own development. So that's a UK agency that usually builds those. Either we work with them or we implement it ourselves. So the idea is that especially Anton will be working a lot on integrations and helping partners achieve those integrations. So as we did with the team, we had all of these processes to onboard extension vendors and educate them on how to do things. So we have video material on how to make Luma extensions Hyvä compatible. We have documentation and all of that, and we do onboarding with extension vendors, and we'll do the same with the checkout. So we work with them, and this is going to be crucial for us to ensure that this checkout becomes a success. Like with the team, the ecosystem is what drives the product.
And we have time for one more question from me. Like at Meet Magento India, everybody was asking, like, when are your extension going to be compatible with Hyvä? You paid those guys, right?
No, we make them happy. They want to work with Hyvä, and we put a lot of effort into getting there. So at first, we gave the first push. We made a lot of extensions compatible with our community, with our partners. And then the demand came automatically to, as you have noticed, people start demanding from you to offer Hyvä compatibility. And that looks like a job well done on our end. But we're super happy to have you as partner on board as well, one of our latest additions. And we're looking forward to the roadmap of many more AdWords extensions to be compatible.
Okay, a round of applause for Willem. Let's thank him.
Thank you.